Hi everyone, my name is Selena and welcome back to Beyond Borders Teaching. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode. In today's episode, we'll be discussing a day in the life of a teacher in Trinidad versus the United States. I felt as though this would be a good topic to cover for you all to see a clearer picture of the differences I have observed and thought of and felt like I should share teaching back home versus teaching in the United States. Stay tuned. So for a typical day, teaching in my home country usually starts at 8:30 for the students. As educators, we would need to be there around 8 o'clock, 8:20. But the day officially starts at 8:30 and ends at 3 o'clock. So that's the first notable difference. At my school, teachers need to be there at 7:15. The kids come to the class by 7:25 and my day ends at 3 o'clock. So the kids are dismissed at 2:30. However, kids go home via bus. Some are picked up by their parents in the car and some are considered walkers. So they are walked a couple steps from the school in which their parents may be waiting to meet them at that location to continue walking with them because they live nearby or waiting in cars to pick them up from that particular location. So, of course, the time is one of the things that was different. There are other major notable differences. For example, how the class day runs. So for my particular schedule, when I taught back home, it will involve teaching at least 5 various subject areas for the day. So, and also the teaching aspect, things were taught in isolation and then brought all together. When I say that, what I'm referring to is usually I would start off my day with phonics. Get those words in, the word sounds, the letter sounds, the phonics in. Of course, followed by whatever you choose, whether it be phonics, vocabulary, grammar, creative writing, comprehension, whatever ELA subjects. Also, of course, math. I would have also preferred to do those key subjects like anything involving ELA or math. I would try to do that in the morning period where the kids' attention span is more there and receptive to what you are teaching. So that would be in the morning period. As well as we would teach other subject areas, of course, like the sciences and the social studies, which I would typically do after lunch, where the kids are still receptive as they need to be all day at school. However, with those subjects, I'd find it more beneficial to teach after lunch. Then we'll go into science and social studies. So that was something as I will compare to when I speak about what takes place in the US classroom. So that's something I really liked, that things were taught in isolation. So you were able to focus in and zone in on that particular skill that you would have been teaching. In the area of math, similarly, if you are teaching the subject of division, it is just division. You're focusing only on division. Versus, like, for example, the unit I'm teaching now in math here, it involves 2 standards, which is time, looking at elapsed time, and now we are going into metric measurements. And all of this is within the same unit. Versus, as I said, for example, in math, if you're teaching division, we're focusing on division. Word problems with division. Regular, looking at the algorithm, the division algorithm, or whatever those types of strategies are. So that's one of the differences. Of course, the morning announcements, we would have a morning assembly where the students would be in a line, neat, formal, and we'd have our pledge, our anthem. As I may have mentioned before, I would have taught at a Catholic school, so we involved prayers. Our lives, our days were filled with prayer. So we had a morning prayer, we had a lunch prayer, before lunch, after lunch, and we had a home time prayer. The lesson plans were to be planned by the teacher. We would have been given a curriculum guide for the standard or the grade we'd be teaching in. And within that, we would have to formulate our lesson plans based on looking at that curriculum guide. So at some point throughout your teaching day or your weekend, you would have to come up with writing a lesson plan, which is usually submitted to the principal, who would view it, veto it, give it back to you, or let you know if you have to make any changes going forward. Other aspect would have been like staff meetings. Staff meetings were usually held once a month. So it's something we would look forward to, and the kids would be dismissed usually at half day to facilitate our staff meeting, which would take place half day. We would also have some extracurricular activities. I remember when I was back home, my kids would have been doing pan. So they had a pan teacher. You all may know of the steel pan, which was one of the last instruments created in the 21st century, and it was made by my beautiful country. So the kids would be given an opportunity to learn to play the pan. When the kids come in the morning, breakfast is available, and so they will have breakfast before starting the day. Usually if they come early enough before the assembly, or if they come after the assembly, they will get breakfast at that time. Lunch as well will be provided before the lunch hour starts. So the lunch is there already pre-packaged in boxes, and the students teacher would send students to collect the lunches, and the lunches will be distributed to the students at lunchtime, which is different, as I will explain in the upcoming part as to what happens in the US classroom. A typical day, however, in the US classroom is a bit different. So, as I would have explained, the kids get to school at 7:15 and they are allowed into class at 7:25. When they come in at 7:15, they head to the cafeteria area in which they have their breakfast. At 7:25, they come to class, and from there, they wait for morning announcement. At that time, when my students arrive at 7:25, I would have already placed on their desk morning work. So whether it be something I print on whatever standard I'm working on for them to practice, or they have a morning workbook, which is geared towards ELA, for them to read a story, a poem, and answer questions on it. Sometimes as well, I allow them to use their laptop, where they may go on an online platform. I am using Vocabulary currently, for them to also get started on some sort of assignment or something I would have assigned for them to do for morning work. So that's usually what happens. And then they wait for morning announcement, which takes place over the Clear Touch, which is like a big television screen. And it would be read, what would be read would be their PBIS pledge, their school pledge. They would say their Pledge of Allegiance. They would also listen out for what's going to come for lunch. Birthday announcements are also made. And depending on what we are focusing on, for example, in March, we were looking at Women's History Month. They were given a little tidbit about a woman in history. So that's something done over the morning announcement. From that aspect, we go into teaching ELA. So teaching is done in a block. So I have a 2-hour span for ELA. As I was explaining, in Trinidad, we would teach things in isolation. So spelling is taught separate, phonics, vocabulary, grammar, math, whatever is taught separate. Versus in the ELA block, you teach everything within that time. So usually, for example, if I'm working with one of their textbooks used here called Wonders, I would start off with vocabulary. Based on that course, I did letters, which I spoke to you all about before. These are the science of reading. They talk about a lot how rich vocabulary is towards reading and comprehension. So I would usually start with vocabulary. So there would be certain words that would be highlighted throughout their text. So we will go to the vocabulary, look at those words, what they mean, how to use it in a sentence. They'll be asked questions about those words in their books, in which they will have to answer. I usually will give them a unit guide that goes along with the unit, so they know what we are focusing on, what are the skills, what are the genres we'll be reading, things of that nature. And then we will get into whatever the video is to give more background information towards the essential question in the unit. They would read something called their I can statements, as well as they will get in then to reading whatever the text is. So we would read and go through the activities as a class orally. For example, when we were looking at point of view, after teaching them what was point of view, we read about point of view, we watched videos, etc. Then we read the passage together as a class. I had them first in their books underline whatever the key pronouns were that speaks the point of view. And then as a class, I had them tell me, and on the clear touch, I would have underlined from what they said in terms of what was the point of view, what pronouns helped them find the point of view. Just for an example, from ELA, went into math. Math as well would have been taught for 140 minutes. Within both those time frames for math and ELA, we have whole group and then we have small group. Whole group is for an hour for ELA, 40 minutes for math, and then we go into small group time. As I would have explained before, I love small group. Now, small group is where you get to pull the kids in small chunks. So while the class is working, I would pull my kids 3 or 4 of them at a time to work on a particular standard of whatever we may be covering within class that week. Or I may look at their past post-test to determine the skills that still needs to be worked on, or their benchmark that passed recently. Look at that data to plan my small group instructions as to what are the things I need to work with this particular group of students. So those are things I look at in terms of developing small group plan. Back in my home country, we'd be given a curriculum guide, and from it we would plan our lessons to suit. In the US, at least in the state I am currently, the lesson plans are already created for us. There are various links that you would press to either download the PowerPoint that goes with the lesson plan, download the worksheet that goes with the lesson plan, or it tells you what page for the various textbooks we use that will go with the lesson plan. And from that, I will print if I need to, in order for the students to follow along with what is being taught, which is different. Back home, we would usually have to make our own plans as to what we are going to teach. So that was a notable difference for me and something I appreciated. The workload is different though. We have a lot more things to do in regards to the bulletin board in the corridors. Each grade have a board in which they have to change throughout the academic school year. So the board we have currently, for example, is one geared towards giving them that belief in themselves, that drive, that determination towards going towards their EOG, to raise their self-esteem and to give them that internal motivation they need going forward. As well as in our classrooms, we have something called a focus wall. So there are 4 focus walls geared towards the subjects we teach. So science, social studies, math, ELA. On the ELA focus wall, there's a part of the wall that has their I can statements, a part of the wall that says the genre of what we are reading. It has the standards we'll be looking at, the standards. There's also the essential question we'll be focusing on, as well as a phonics area, spelling area, and the ELA focus wall. On the math, there's the vocabulary words as well. On all the focus walls, you're going to find vocabulary words from what we'll be doing within that particular unit or standard. The I can statements, different strategies in how to complete whatever task we may be learning in math. And science, social studies, similar. We'll have the essential questions, the vocabulary words, and things of that nature on those focus walls. So it's a good tool in which I use to help my students or keep them on track as to what we are learning within the various units. In my home country, I'd consider myself, other than a teacher, a resource maker. Oftentimes, we would make resources with our kids or for our kids. Versus in the US, a lot of the resources are already provided. So sometimes it's not in my classroom. However, if I ask my instructional coach, it will be provided for me. So I would use those various resources in order to facilitate the needs of my lesson. For example, today we looked at metric measurements. So I would have used various scales and different weights and stuff for my students to get a hands-on feel for measurement. We also looked at centimeters, meters. So I gave them the meter rule, the ruler, an inch tape. Then I cut a string that was a meter long for them to measure. I gave them a centicube in order for them to measure, and they were able to walk around the class and measure things. So that was also something innovative. Found things around the classroom to facilitate the lesson, as well as the resources that were also provided and also for them to be able to do the lesson. So I just want to start finishing up by stating the key differences I noticed and reflected. Some things that surprised me in the US was the lunchtime and the recess time. As I would have explained before, we are with our students all day except for when they go to their resource. In my home country, the kids are with the teacher all day as well. However, at lunchtime, we have an hour for lunch. The kids have an hour for lunch, and at that time, they are free to play without adult supervision. Of course, there are members of staff who stay on the compound, the principal, but the classroom teacher herself or him or himself is able to leave the compound and come back. That is not so here. As well as the kids have an hour home for lunch, versus here, they are given an hour too, but 25 minutes is spent with them having lunch. We go to the cafeteria, they get their lunch, they sit and they eat, and then after we would go outside for them to have their recess with the teacher present watching them. As well as we have various areas for them to play. So there's the field, there's the basketball court, and they also have the playground area, which is within a sandbox. It has the monkey bars, it has the slides, and things of that nature. So that was something different for me, a notable change for me. As well as I would have explained the block teaching, where there's an ELA block, a math block, science, and social studies block. Versus, as I would have explained back home, there was no set way in which you are told to teach your lesson. You just know you aim for roughly 5 lessons for the day, and you plan your time to suit, and you teach your different subjects in isolation, as I would have shared before as well. So that was one of the notable differences for me. As well as the emails. Daily we are sent many emails, whether it be from administration, members of staff, because we always have various events or surveys to answer or anything. We have lots of emails, as well as every week we are sent an update, a calendar that tells us what will be happening daily throughout for that month, whether it be a test, whether it be a field trip, whether it be a staff meeting. A staff meeting as well as also happens weekly. Versus in my home country, staff meetings happen once a month. And as I explained, kids are dismissed half day to facilitate that staff meeting. In the US, staff meeting happens weekly and it is done after working hours. So at 3 o'clock, that's when the meeting begins. It usually ends around 4 o'clock. So that was also a notable difference. And there are 9 grading periods for the school year. In my home country, there are 3 main grading periods for the school year. So they would have their grading period for Christmas, they would have one for Easter, and then they will have one for summer, July. That's the 3 grading periods in my home country. Versus in the US, the kids are given a progress report, which takes place every week, every 4 weeks, and then they are also given their quarterly reports, which is taking place after that. So they are given a total of 9 reports. So it's a way, of course, for parents to be in the know. Not at the end of a school term, the parents are able to know every 4 weeks to every quarter how their child is doing and where they are at. As well as after the report goes home, parents are then either called to have a teleconference or invited in to see the teacher, to have a one-on-one, to have a sit down and chat about the child's progress or whatever is being noticed by the students in the classroom. Some things I definitely miss about teaching in my home country. For one, I miss the hour lunch. As much as I love being around my kids, of course, sometimes you just want a little time to yourself. So that hour lunch, I miss that. I miss the vacation time. For the Easter break, we are given roughly 10 days versus in my home country, it's approximately 3 weeks. So I'm just saying that because that's the most current time coming up. For Christmas as well, we are given roughly 3 weeks as well. And of course, for summer, we are given 2 months. So July, August, we are off. Of course, it's different here. We are given 10 days for Easter, approximately 10 days for Christmas, and then we are given at least a longer time for summer. We are given roughly 2 to 3 months because the last day for the kids usually is the last week in May. But then teachers, we need to stay out at school to wrap up the year because there's a lot to do to wrap up and end the year. So after the kids are dismissed last week in May, we usually stay on for 2 more weeks before officially being sent off. And then we are to come back 2 weeks earlier before the kids return to us at the end of August. So that's some notable differences and things that I also miss. I'd also say teaching back home was more simple. And simple doesn't mean bad. As much as I would have spoken about, we have multiple resources here in terms of to facilitate our lessons. And even though I created resources with my kids and for my kids back home, they still learned. So that's something as well I really wanted to note. Back home as well, there were projects the kids got to do. So usually our mid-term, our mid-year term, the kids were given some sort of project that would go towards their grade. Kids are not given projects here. They are given various tests, and those tests goes towards their grade. However, those tests and assignments, classroom work, homework, participation, all of that goes to their grades is something as well I like and appreciate because it is already graded. So when the kids do their tests, it's already graded there. So it's not like back home I will have to collect papers, correct papers, put in grades because everything is usually done online. And of course, there's some paperwork too. I give my kids paperwork too. But a lot of the things can be assigned online and can be graded online. So it's just about me putting it into the grade book online. And then, of course, the numbers are calculated for their grades. So I don't have to pull out my calculator to calculate them as I would. What I appreciate about the US was the pre-planned lessons I spoke about before. The lessons are already planned, the resources that's available, the support, I would say, from administration and my instructional coach. And it's not that I'm saying at home I did not feel supported by administration. However, I would say it's a bit different here. Back home, we would have the photocopy machine, we'd print our stuff. And here, there's a photocopy machine to print stuff. And for example, my instructional coach, she'd be very supportive in not only printing stuff for me, but also guiding me towards how to get things to facilitate my lesson. One of our PLC times, she showed us, and I'm sharing with you, Magic School. You all should check it out. It's a platform where you can go in and create quizzes, you could create assignments, you could create a PowerPoint presentation, you could create a multitude of things to work with your kids. And I really feel supported by my administration and instructional coach because they often try to assist me and assist my students in any way I can ask them. One of the things I have really appreciated here as well is the resource times. Now, that resource time, which is a period of 40 minutes, is where the students go for either PE, they have a PE teacher, a specialized teacher for music, one for art, one for media, which is where they will go to the library, learn various aspects on their computers, as well as, of course, the library itself, where they can borrow books. In art as well, sometimes they also use their laptops as they are learning how to do things with AutoCAD and make 3D images, which I found super cool. As well, they have lab, so it's supposed to be learning various scientific stuffs and STEM activities. And they also have SEL, which stands for socio-emotional learning. So they learn those skills as well. So I really like that addition here in the US because I really think it helps the student to be holistic as well as for them to be self-aware in the other area. Remind you all to please like, follow, share, and subscribe. Thank you all so much for tuning in again this week. I really hope this information I shared was able to help you all in some way, as well as to see things from a different perspective. Now, being here, I have always felt, and I would have shared this, that I wish education could have been more universal instead of country to country, state to state. Because, for example, things that I would have done back home, I wish I can do them here. One of the things for me personally is the fact that we taught things in isolation. If I could just be able to just focus on phonics alone for a whole lesson to make sure the kids get that, or spelling alone, or grammar by itself, or vocabulary alone, instead of teaching it in a block. So, of course, I can do that. As I said, I would start with vocabulary, I may throw in some phonics, and then I go into mainly teaching comprehension skills, that type of thing. That is something that I wish I could have incorporated more of. So for my final thoughts, I'd like to share, I would say teaching in a foreign country can feel like learning a new dance. It may seem unfamiliar at first, but keep taking the steps. You will soon find your rhythm. I believe I found mine. So in next week's episode, I look forward for you all hearing or listening or viewing this channel again. And in that episode, we will have our next international teacher. She came here with me in terms of the same year, and she's from the beautiful island of Jamaica. I can't wait for you all to hear her story. Something that really impressed me with her, she was a principal in her country, and she came here for this experience. I can't wait for you all to hear her share her story. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in to Beyond Borders Teaching. Have a fantastic week. Please tune in again next week, Thursday at